Hey, you guys, welcome to a amazing interview. I'm so excited for this one in particular because it's about food, which is one of my favorite subjects, and it's about hormones, which is one of my other favorite subjects besides the pelvic floor. So today I have Magdalena with me. We are going to be talking about cooking and eating for hormone health, for hormone balance, with a particular focus on estrogen dominance, which is something that you may have heard of, you may know that you're experiencing, and we're going to give you tips. Well, Magdalena is going to give you tips and clues as to whether or not this might be an issue for you throughout the course of our conversation. So please buckle up. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to let Magdalena really kind of introduce herself and just tell us a little more about, who you are, Magdalena, how you got into this, a short nutshell version, and then I want to dive into the juice of this topic. So thank you for being here. Please let us know a little more about you.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Magdalena Wszelaki. I'm the founder of Hormones Balance. It's a nutrition practice that's dedicated to helping women rebalance their hormones naturally. So using nutrition, but also a bit of supplements, herbs, and a lot of self-mindful techniques, including a lot of good sleep and meditation. But really I focus on nutrition as predominant medium. And the reason why I got into this is because of my own personal hormonal health, that started probably ever since I was a teenager. Thyroid, Hashimoto's, coupled with a lot of digestive issues, which a lot of times you see women having hormonal problems that also goes for a lot of times with digestive issues, like constipation, bloating, a lot of food sensitivities. You eat something, I used to bloat up a lot. Combined with a lot of a very stressful job. I used to work in advertising and live in Asia and cover the region. And so I was traveling a lot. So I think that's where my health really collapsed. And it was like the perfect storm of stress, little sleep, too much alcohol. I used to smoke back then, over-exercising, not being able to fully control my diet because I was living in China at that time, and so my body really came down crashing from Hashimoto's, but I also had estrogen dominance. I probably had adrenal issues, mitochondrial issues, and I was probably very, very toxic. Till today, I still have issues with some heavy metals that I probably have picked up in China. So, so this was 10 years ago. And so I've been doing this, 12 years ago. So I've been doing this now for over a decade as a practitioner. And, and quite frankly, I started because I just had to help myself. And back in the day, there was no book or program that you can just embark on and say, well, those are the 20 things I'm going to do, and I'm going to retest and I feel amazing. That wasn't the case like we have now. So this is where I just had to start putting things together. And I quickly realized that it's just so many, food is one big element, but, I realized like my stress was hugely contributing. If I don't quit my job and move on, then I'm never going to heal.
So did you go to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition mainly for your self-healing then?
I did. Yeah. I did. That was my, I never wanted to quit my job. I loved my job in advertising. I was really good at it. I was highly recognized for my work in the industry. So I was a junkie to my job because it's like, you get a lot of validation from it. But when I got really, really sick, that's when I realized, and then I got fired from my job. When I changed jobs, I got fired and or laid off or whatever. But that was the point where I was like, do I really go and I'll go back to this, or do I create something for myself? And that's what I did 11 years ago. So today, fast forward, I said I'm 46 today, and I feel and I look better than when I was 26, when I was constantly constipated, bloated, with headaches, with a lot of pimples. Never knew when my period was coming, horrendously painful periods, anxiety, tiredness from all the thyroid issues, lumpy boobs. I mean, it's just being so grateful I could put all that behind. And my whole life's mission has become really helping women achieve the same.
And those symptoms that you just mentioned of how you were feeling, the menstrual irregularities and the lumpy breasts and the, all the things you just said, the anxiety, et cetera, those are all symptoms of estrogen dominance, or can be, correct?
Yes, they can be. Fatigue is a tough one, right? Because there can be 30 different reasons why you have fatigue, from being toxic to having thyroid problems to estrogen dominance to having low estrogen. So there's so many reasons. But, you know, like hair falling out, for example, was definitely thyroid. The lumpy boobs and the very irregular periods and the swelling on my limbs, like I was always, you know, I could never take my rings off a lot of the time, right? So water retention, that's definitely due to estrogen dominance, some of the symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to just briefly insert here that friends who are watching right now who may have followed a little bit with my hormone journey is I'm starting to go through perimenopause right now, which is that potentially long span of time before the actual day of menopause when, you know, you haven't had your period in a year. So your hormones really start shifting and changing. And for me, that has started to happen. So when I went to the doc 4 or 5, 6 months ago now, I was tested and found that I do also have relative estrogen dominance because my progesterone has really started to drop.
Yep.
And that's why I have estrogen dominance. It's not necessarily that my estrogen is off the chart. It's just that my progesterone has dropped. And so it makes it a relative estrogen dominance. And that's why I'm so excited about Magdalena's information. And I'm actually going through her program right now, which is called Estrogen Reset. And we're going to talk about that briefly at the end. But it's amazing because I would love for you to tell us next maybe why, why can food impact hormonal health and how can we make this work for us for estrogen dominant?
Yeah. So just to set the stage for it, you know, I think it's a really important question you asked about, like, how does food impact? So first, let me just say that hormonal imbalances are so common in women today, right? So that's like, you tell me, show me a woman who really has no hormonal problems. They almost don't exist, or at least at one point in their life, she didn't, right? And so what happens is, I think it's really important to understand that your hormones are like the last thing that fails when a lot of other things are not working before that, right? So it's your digestion failing, right? Eating foods that are inflammatory, that are causing you that constipation and bloating. You're bloated after a food, you're burping after a meal. Those are already signs your digestion is struggling, right? You see food particles in your poop, right? It also shows you're not digesting things properly. Liver toxicity is another huge issue. You know, just the liver is like a sieve, right? And, you know, if you don't clean up that sieve once in a while, this basically starts overflowing, and that overflowing can cause a lot of hormonal problems.
I'm picturing it. Yeah.
Right. It's very visual, right? Might as well. And the last was blood sugar balance, you know, where a lot of us, especially in the United States, there is just so much sugar found in food here. That was one of my biggest shockers when I moved to the US, was like, wow, there's sugar in everything, and everything is so sweet, and people don't even realize how sweet everything is. Yeah. So, you know, the pre-diabetes, diabetes, but even people who have hypoglycemia, right? That is going to bring your hormones down. And typically these things go on for years before your hormones finally give up and say, I've had enough, and it starts manifesting. So, you know, so if you think about it, gut, liver, sugar balance, right? We can fix all of those things with good nutrition. And so, you know, just to give you maybe a couple of simple pointers, like, for example, in digestion, if you want to restore your digestive health, the first thing you want to remove is the fire that causes the inflammation in the first place. And so in the inflammatory foods, I think it's no rocket science. I mean, everybody's doing it for a reason. Get off gluten and dairy just for a couple of weeks to see how much better you feel, right? Mm-hmm. Women, you know, like I tell you, like, for example, hot flashes, how many women have reported that when they get off gluten and dairy, they reduce sugar, for example, their hot flashes go away. This has been plaguing them for the past 10 years. Mm-hmm. You know, liver, right, is another one. So doing some, you know, and I'm not talking here about those detoxes. You go and drink juices for 2 weeks and then you come back and you binge again. I'm a much bigger proponent of just eating foods and supporting your liver every day. So it's like the little thing that matters a lot. And, you know, whether that means, for example, starting with a lemon juice in a glass of water. So like 2 tablespoons of lemon juice or apple cider vinegar in a glass of, 6 to 10 ounces of water before a meal. That's going to be huge support towards the liver. Avoiding things like all the fried foods. Food intolerances, all these sensitive foods that I mentioned, can really support the liver a lot. And then bringing in a lot of these foods, these vegetables that are bitter in nature, that's going to help to support the liver. So, you know, vegetables like kale, broccoli sprouts, parsley, cilantro, right? They all have the bitter elements to them, right? That's all gonna, and it's not just the bitter, but they also contain a few other compounds in there, like that aldehydomethane and asulforaphane, which is, mambo jumbo, just to say there are compounds that help with specific pathways in the liver to help you detoxify.
What about the cruciferous vegetables too are also important, right?
Yeah, so I mentioned some of them, right? So kale, cabbage, all the radishes, cauliflower, right? So yeah, bring those on. And if you can do, between 4 to 6 servings a day, and a serving will be a cup of vegetables. I'm definitely a fan of cooking them instead of eating them raw. That's already a huge, huge win. And take out all these vegetables that are just nutritionally also kind of useless, like your lettuce. I mean, just let that go. Replace your lettuce with arugula, for example. Arugula is also a cruciferous vegetable, as you mentioned, and it's a bitter, and it's nutritionally much more, it's richer and dense as compared to something like a lettuce, right?
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought about just replacing lettuce with arugula or rocket, as they say in Europe.
Exactly.
That is a great idea. Just a great suggestion right there. And also, I was mowing my lawn today, and I actually thought of you because in my Estrogen Reset program that I'm going through, I know you talk about dandelion greens as an option for people. And I was literally mowing over dandelions and thinking, oh, could actually save these. But I mean, that's really neat.
A little word of caution here with dandelions. They're absolutely wonderful. You're right. They're a tough vegetable to eat. So I like to blend them into things, like saute them or add them with other vegetables. But you also have to remember, don't pick dandelions on lawns that have been sprayed with any form of fertilizers or pesticides. And then make sure that if it's wild, then don't pick those ones along paths, because dogs will pee on those.
Yeah.
Get off a little bit off the path, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I love it.
So I just want to mention, so you mentioned estrogen dominance. So can I just mention some of the symptoms, so maybe our audience can?
Oh yes, please, absolutely, yeah.
Because it's a term that I think is. I mean, my whole mission now is just to really create much more awareness about estrogen dominance, so that women know what it is. But symptoms include some very common things almost every woman has experienced at one point in her life. And so the predominant one would be like how your period is working or not working. So women who, for example, don't get their periods, or women who have very irregular, scatty periods, or women who have periods for 20 days in their cycle, right? And they're absolutely depleted and exhausted. Women who have spotting instead of like doing ovulation, right? When you're ovulating, have brown spotting. That could also be due to estrogen dominance. And then you have the other, things that impact things like infertility, right? So infertility, there's many causations to it, but one of the big ones you mentioned, low progesterone, but also women who have, we can talk about this in a second, how you break down those estrogens matters as much, but also having low progesterone, that's where infertility can oftentimes, or women who lose their pregnancy in the first trimester, oftentimes is due because they are low on progesterone. And other things like more like if you talk about malignant tissue growth. So things like, for example, so fibrocystic breasts, right? Lumpy boobs, having nodules on your thyroid when your doctor inspected, you had a scan done. And here's the funny thing about these things, is that docs tell us, well, fibroids, for example, right? Not a good example. It's also estrogen dominant. The doc will tell you, well, come back in 3-6 months time and let's watch it. And I'm like, watch what? like if you had like a growth on your hand here, like, wouldn't you do something about it, right? And of course, Western medicine's way of going about it is to cut it out, right? Yeah. Well, cutting it out doesn't address the root cause of a problem. So you can have your thyroid removed, have a partial thyroidectomy, but guess what? Estrogen dominance is still a problem. So now it's going to be lumpy boobs, and the lumpy boob can develop into breast cancer, right? So, and so on the more serious spectrum of symptoms of estrogen dominance, you have estrogenic cancers, which is breast cancer in the United States. The estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, that's the cancer that 75% of women have. The other ones, the genetic ones, are like less than 10%. So like the one that Angelina Jolie had, which created such a scare, it's a very rare form of cancer with a mutation that you have. But all the other cancers is something that you can completely take control over your health to manage and prevent it from ever happening to you, right? But also uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, as well as lung cancer in non-smokers and thyroid cancer are all estrogenic cancers. So the growth of the tumor happens. The tumor literally has estrogen receptors in it. So when the estrogen gets in, that's what causes the growth of that malignant tissue, right? So, and then let me also not forget about endometriosis, another very common problem with a lot of women, horrible condition, something that women suffer so badly. It's literally, if you talk to someone who had endometriosis, they will tell you that it feels like you're in labor for 20 days a month, right? Because that's how horrendously painful endometriosis can be. And again, the endometrial tissue grows because it's fueled by estrogen dominance of the metabolites.
And this is an issue that affects 1 in 10 women.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, endometriosis is actually very common and a big deal. And as you're talking here, I've got something has just been running through my mind, and that's that really the eating program that you have to help with conditions such as estrogen dominance, which clearly can be such a problem on so many levels, but the eating program that you have, why not just do it? Even if, in a way I'm thinking, why not just do it? Even if you don't, know for sure, because it's a very healthy program. I can attest to it. It's a very nutritionally dense program.
Yeah.
Super whole foods, unprocessed, clean. It's like there's nothing that it could hurt.
Absolutely.
And only help.
Absolutely. It's not like it's a keto cancer program, where it's specifically keto and not everybody can do it and you don't have cancer. So yeah, you're right. And, we get very often emails saying, can my husband eat this? And we're like, totally. We promise he's not going to grow any boobs for sure. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Kids can have it too, So absolutely. And I would just mention also one more thing, because that's an audience, your audience might appreciate that too. Another symptom of estrogen dominance is women who is a pear shape and has got a lot of weight around her hips, and including cellulite and fat that just wouldn't go away. And so you exercise so much, and you do all these rollers on the thighs to get rid of the cellulite, and do all these exercises on the lower half, and it just wouldn't budge, right? That's another sign of estrogen dominance. Women who are estrogenic tend to be pear-shaped. They store a lot of fat there. Women who are apple-shaped, right, so it's all around the abdomen, will be typically having problems with, basically with sugar balance. So it's all the metabolic disorders, including prediabetes, diabetes, women with PCOS. So it's a really interesting. Your body stores fat differently depending what kind of a hormonal imbalance you have.
Wow, that is fascinating. Oh my gosh. So I want to talk about the program just briefly, but before we do that, I want to ask you specifically about seed cycling. I actually have a chocolate recipe that I can share in the video notes about how to get my chocolate cycling recipe, which comes in part from you and your amazing information that you have. But is seed cycling recommended for estrogen dominance or not?
Yes, it is. So first of all, I cannot take credit for seed rotation, because it is something that's being taught in naturopathic schools. It was my naturopath who taught me that method. Yeah. Seed rotation, basically the idea is, and are you gonna post the link explaining what it is?
I'll post a link explaining what it is, and I'll post also a link for my moon chocolate recipe, which uses the seeds for each phase. And in a delicious homemade chocolate recipe. So yeah, all those links will be in the video notes for sure.
So I just do with a big idea. The big idea is basically to use certain seeds. So first part of your cycle is basically your what's called the follicular phase, where you wanna bring out the good estrogens at that point, and that can come from two seeds. One is flaxseed, the other one is pumpkin seed, and And you do that 1 tablespoon freshly ground tablespoon of each of these seeds for the first 14 days. So starting from first day of your period until mid-cycle. And then you switch to seeds that promote progesterone production. Now, food doesn't contain progesterone, unlike estrogen. But what you can do is you give sufficient nutrition to the corpus luteum, right, around your ovaries, so that that's where progesterone is produced. And so that nutrition will come from sesame seeds and sunflower seeds. And you do the same thing, 1 tablespoon ground each. So, use the recipes. I love the chocolate idea because then you're also putting in cacao in there, which is very high in magnesium. So that's an additional benefit. And most women really benefit a lot from there. So, I think what's an interesting point to bring out here is a lot of your listeners might be thinking now, why is it that if somebody is estrogen dominant, why are you talking about bringing in estrogen in the first part of the cycle in the first place? I'm already dominant, and what the heck am I doing bringing in more phytoestrogens into my life? And that's a really valid question. The issue is in the nuance, right? So a little bit of science behind it. And there's, I'm just going to talk about there's 2 types of estrogen dominance. There's one that you mentioned where your estrogen progesterone ratio is unbalanced. Mm-hmm. And it's very normal, especially women who, when you are if you look at a chart, how estrogen and progesterone travel together over a period of span of a woman's life, the 25, 35, we all still good. And after 45, it really starts dropping. Both of them start dropping really quickly. The problem is that the relationship, when you start off when you're 25, you have about, let's just say half, they're balanced out. They're not 1-to-1, but they're balanced out. Just as you go down, when you're the 45, 55, 65, even though you've reduced your estrogen, your hormones from here to here, the balance between estrogen and progesterone is very unbalanced. And typically there's a lot more estrogen as compared to progesterone. So even though both are low, there is an imbalance going on. And this is the reason why women who are, in their 50s and 60s are the ones who are the biggest demographic getting breast cancers. It's you think why? Their estrogens are so low. Well, it's because of the imbalance of those 2. So that's one way is that we can learn to support our body to produce an own progesterone. If it's not happening, whatever reason, then using bioidentical hormones, I think it's a really great idea. But to me, that's like a second, actually a third step. Second, we'll be doing supplements to support that. And then the third one is then if it still doesn't work, then taking progesterone, bioidentical progesterone topically. So that's one type of estrogen dominance. The second type of estrogen dominance is when you have estrogens that need to be broken down. So think of it as it's like a river that's flowing, and you have this bank in the middle. The bank in the middle is your gut and your liver. And that bank is going to split up that river to a clean river and a dirty river. Okay. And that's exactly what happens is that you break down those estrogens, and how effective your gut and your liver is in breaking those down is going to determine that. So you can see it's not the amount of estrogens that matters, but it's how you break down those estrogens. And we know that those dirty estrogens, those are the ones that get into the receptors, for example, of the malignant tissue and causes the growth. Those are the ones that are causing all these nasty symptoms that I talked about, the endometriosis, the breast cancers, the irregular periods, and the list goes on, right? So, but the cool thing is that regardless which type of estrogen dominance you have, by just repairing your digestion, giving your body a lot of nutrition, supporting your liver in how it's going to help you break down those estrogens, is going to profoundly change how you're going to feel very quickly.
Oh, I love this. I could just talk about this forever, and you are a wealth of information. And one way people can access this information is through your program, which I've got to say is comprehensive. It's a significant program. There is a lot of amazing information, but it's so well laid out. It is so easy to use, and you have an entire, recipe book that comes along with it. So please, there's gonna be a link to how to get this in the notes, but please tell us a little bit more about the Estrogen Reset program. And also any programs that you might want to share, because I know you have some others as well.
Yeah, so Estrogen Reset, basically, it starts off with the fundamentals, and the foundation is 3 modules that talks about, first one is what can you do to support your digestion, liver, and how to rebalance your blood sugar levels. And as much as it might sound a little intimidating, the cool thing is that when you come to the recipe, and the meal plan section, the way we've designed and put all these foods in there, they already take care of your digestion, liver, and sugar balance automatically. So you don't have to crack your head about that. If you eat according to the meal plan, you're already achieving all the 3 objectives and covering the fundamentals. And I'm really big on starting off with that. It's a little bit like, we're talking right now I'm in my house in Colorado. I bought the house almost a year ago. And, one of the first things I did was, because I'm on a slope, right? I have this amazing view going into the valley, but it's also a house that's perched on a slope. And I'm like, it's an old house. So what do I do? The first thing is I get an engineer to come in here and check out the foundation, right? If the foundation isn't good, all this beautiful house ain't gonna matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, the hormones is exactly the same thing. Like, you need to set the foundation. And I always talk about the 3-legged stool analogy. If you want to sit comfortably on a 3-legged stool, all the 3 legs need to be in place, because otherwise you're going to be wobbling and you fall. And so with hormones, is exactly the same thing. Fix your digestion, right? Anti-inflammatory diet, support your liver and better detoxification, and then balance your blood sugar levels, and according to the meal plan. So that's the foundation. And then, for some people, I tell you, it's like the symptoms start resolving so quickly. They don't even need to proceed any further. Mm-hmm. And for others, it's like, I'm still having, like, my breasts are still fibrocystic. Like, then we have specific protocols for 12 different conditions. Like, if you have endometriosis, what else can you do in terms of very targeted supplements or practices? Like, for example, for women who have lumpy boobs, one of the big things that I'm a big advocate of is using castor oil packs. So there is a compress that you can buy, soak it up with castor oils and put it around your breast. And castor oil moves lymphatics like crazy, and it's a highly detoxifying, highly penetrating oil, right? And then adding a few essential oils to it to support that process. So those are like the add-ons, if you will. I call it the add-on protocols to a condition. So we have add-ons for endometriosis, fibrocystic breasts, for different period problems, right? Infertility, and the list goes on. So that's how I structured it. And, women follow this, and it's like, one of the things I love about estrogen dominance as a condition is that you can really quickly change it. As compared to, for example, when you have thyroid Hashimoto's, it's an autoimmune disease. There's a lot more work that needs to be put in. That's very multifactorial, that can take sometimes years to resolve. Mm-hmm. Adrenal issues is the same thing. Like, it's not just a diet, it's a whole lifestyle change. It's your relationship with self. It can take years to fix. Mm-hmm. I feel like with estrogen dominance, we just launched the program in June, and we already have women. We are now in July, and women saying like, "Oh my God, I've just lost 20 pounds, 15 pounds. Like, everything is just happening. My nodules are disappearing." There's like every other day we get a yay email from women coming on saying that how they just came from a doctor and everything is looking so much better. So yeah, that stuff works, and it's no rocket science and to do. I think every woman should just try it.
I love it. And, I love the natural approach. All of you guys know that I love my essential oils, and I love the herbal approach that you do use, but you keep it simple and you make it doable and manageable, and not too, nothing crazy. There's nothing crazy in your program. It's all stuff you can find at the store, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, there's going to be links to everything that's pertinent to this program, to Magdalena's website, to my moon chocolate recipe. That's all going to be below the video. And is there anything else that you wanted to share with us today? Any last nuggets, Magdalena? Yeah.
I think I would. One is the interesting thing is I forgot to mention at the beginning when I was talking about my story is that I have cancer death, estrogenic cancer deaths on both sides of my family, both my dad and my mom's side, aunts, and including both of my grandfathers passed from lung cancer, which was non-smokers, so probably estrogenic. And so when you look at my genetics, I have all the genes that are, I have all the variants, as they call it, but mutations, you might call it too, that are highly compromised. And you're talking about both sides, so double mutations on the genes that are responsible for coding for enzymes that help you break estrogen. So this is another way of saying I'm a super slow estrogen detoxifier. And that explains why is it that, if I go to, let's say, Spain, or Italy, right? And be naughty for a couple of weeks and just do my wine and maybe don't avoid gluten at all times and don't sleep as much and do coffee. I come back with lumpy boobs like right away. My period is from hell. So my body is just so, and when I went to see my naturopath, is my functional doc, she's an MD, and she looked at my, because I brought a whole, like a printout of labs, and she looked at the genetics interpretation of labs. And the first thing she asked me, without looking at my health history, she asked me, you're 44, this was 2 years ago, you're 44, have you had breast cancer? I said, well, that's a huge question. The answer is no. I've always had lumpy boobs, but I know how to manage it now. And she says, yeah, 80% of women who come to my practice with your kind of genes would have breast cancer by now.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What an impactful statement that she made there.
So it was a reminder, and I think a moment of gratitude that because of the lifestyle probably that I've been living, that I've prevented that from, and I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm 46, who knows what's going to happen when I'm 80, right? But I know I'm doing all I can to fight the fight and prevent it. So my message, I think, as the last takeaway from this is that if you're having these terrible periods, if you're having these lumpy boobs, don't ignore it at this point, because those are early signs that something is brewing already. And it is the easiest time now for you to go and change it. And, somebody posted the other day, it's like, oh, it's pretty expensive to eat this way. And I'm like, you know what? It's really expensive to pay for it later when you're sick.
Yeah.
Like broccoli sprouts don't cost you that much money. Yeah. So, I say, do it now. Don't wait. Do it as a prevention.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Excellent way to end it. I think we can just put a cherry on top right there. That was a mic drop. We are good. I'm thrilled to have had you on my show today, to have interviewed you. How can people get in touch with you? Again, it's going to be in the video notes, but just say again your website.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And so it's Hormones Balance, Hormones with an S, hormonesbalance.com is my website and my home, my digital home.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, everything will be in the video notes. Thank you so much, Magdalena. I really appreciate this, and I'm so excited about your program for my own selfish personal reasons and to help my community too, because I know a lot of people will benefit from this.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, bye.
Bye.